Okay, so this next piece is going to be, this is part two. Part one, we created our canvas and we saved, well, we didn't save our file. Let's go ahead and save it now. And we're going to create some imagery inside here. I'm trying to make it look like a photography website. So I'm going to create like a little portfolio page where I'll be saving things. So let's, I've started saving a bunch of images out here to a folder for Photoshop web design. Okay, and so I'm going to call this Photoshop file, Photoshop web design. Yeah, you can call it anything you like. Alright, and so now I've just got a working PSD Photoshop file, and I can start bringing in some assets. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can bring in assets, pictures, right? You can open them up individually, you can drag them onto the canvas. We can actually go right to where these images are and start opening up some of them, right? And just do Control-A, copy, right? And that copies that entire piece, and then paste it into that canvas. Alright? So, as we start to paste in elements, the one thing that we need to remember is that we want to start naming our layers and organizing things. Alright, so I'm going to bring in just a couple of these for now and then work on the rest of the design here. So let's bring in the camera piece here. Now I'm going to take this camera, I'm going to take the magic wand tool and click inside the white area and then do Control-Shift-I, because that will select the opposite of the white area, which is the camera piece. And it works really well on this one because of the white background. So then I can say Control-C to copy, and then I can head out to the site and paste it, and I have one piece. So that way, you know, it's not a square image, and it can overlap over pieces like that, right? And that might come in handy for when we go and create that site. All right. So let's bring in one more image, and let's see, kind of like this one, Control-A, copy, alright, and paste that one in there. And of course, scaling it is Control-T, that's the way I like to do it, and then you grab the corners, but you have to remember to hold your Shift key, and that way it'll stay in proportion. You won't lose any of that quality, or it won't become distorted, the pixels. Alright? So, alright, so let's start by designing this a little bit. So, the one thing I want to do is, I want to create, instead of having this solid white background, I want to kind of create a gradient across the whole thing. Alright? So I'm going to go in here, and I notice my foreground and background color are set to like a bright yellow and a white. If you hit D on your keyboard, D stands for default. And it will return you to the default of black and white. Black for your foreground, white for your background. And then you can go over and grab the gradient tool, which is right here. If you see the paint bucket tool, that means the gradient tool is going to be underneath it. By default, the gradient tool is on top. But you know, whatever tool you use in Photoshop, when you go back to use it again, whatever one you used last, that's the one that you'll see. So if I was looking for gradient, I used paint bucket previously, I may notice that, oh, where's my gradient tool? Oh, well, I have to remember that it's actually underneath where paint bucket is. So I'm going to go and drag a line from the top here, but I'm not going to go all the way down, because that would give me an even transition from black to white. I'm going to go part way. But better yet, I don't like how dark it is up there. So I'm going to change the black color to be a lighter gray. And then the white color, I don't want it to be that white. I'm just going to bring it a little bit off of the white. Not much, but a little bit. Okay? So you can just click inside these colors, foreground, background, and the color picker will let you choose a different color. So now if I go and redraw the gradient, it'll add it in there very subtly. Okay? And that's going to be the entire background of the website. So you got to remember though, we're going to be deploying this to CSS, so the actual content is going to be inside this middle section, the 960 grid. So what I'm going to do inside that middle section, I'm decided, well, you know, I'm not going to have that be the gradient color. I'm going to have that be a white background. And maybe just an off-white like I chose here. Maybe I don't want full-on white. So I can go and switch foreground and background, which is X on the keyboard to switch those back and forth. And then let's create a new layer in my layers palette. Let's name this one gradient background first. Let's start naming some of these things. I'll name that one gradient background, and then I'm going to choose a new layer, and I'm going to name this, let's call this content background. Content BG for background. It doesn't show up in there all the way anyways. Gradient BG. And so I'm going to take the marquee tool, I'm going to draw inside my 960 grid, right? And then grab my paint bucket tool and fill it in with that really light white color. So that way, now I can see if I hit Control D and then I hit Control H to get rid of my guides, that's what I have so far. And sometimes what I do is I'll design things as I go along, because I may decide, you know, I don't like that. And that would be as easy as turning off that grid and say going with this. You won't see any definition between the content and the outside, but that may be okay. So, yeah. And then there's little tricks and things you can do to try to make the site stand out more. And one of the things you can do is add layer styles. So let's see how this looks. I have a feeling I might take away the whole content piece that I just added. But let's say if I want to add a layer style, like a gray outer glow to this element right here. I can double click the layer. It'll bring up the layer style box. And let's say I want to try to see what an outer glow might look like. Alright, and I want to change it not to this yellowy substance, but kind of a darker gray. Right? And I'm going to click OK on that for being the color, but I want to see what it spread. I'm going to spread this out a little bit, change the size. Now you see where the size is changing it? So I actually could make that look like that. Spread it out a little bit. And then I can try different blend modes with that too if I wanted to. Screen is probably one of the more popular ones, but I can darken it or create a I don't want a hard mix. I can go through these by using my arrow keys. One thing I like about these PC drop-downs is that you can select one and you can arrow key through all of them to see what the different looks will look like for the blend mode. And that's simply blending the actual white square style that we added to it, the outer glow, with what's underneath it, which is the gradient. That one's actually, color burn's actually kind of cool. Multiply goes all the way down. Color burn, it's kind of cool because it starts off dark like that and then it fades out. I kind of like color burn, so I'm going to go with that one. Alright, and let's click OK. Alright, so let's work on that camera. The camera is a little too big for the site. So let's rename that. I can call it Nikon D7000. Alright, and Command T, Control T, depending if you're Mac or PC, will give you the free transform tool. And go in there and hold down the Shift and resize that camera to be the size that you want. Now, here you can decide, well, you know, I'm going to have a banner with my logo across the top, maybe some contact information. I'm not sure how much I want to show here. And you also can decide if you want to actually be off the screen or not. A lot of times I'll just move these things around to see what they might look like. Okay, let's just try that. There we go. Alright? And let's go ahead and add, okay, so that's that element. These are the thumbnails. I'm going to change the layer ordering a little bit, put this camera at the top. Grab my move tool. These right here, this one is the under the peer, surfer, under peer, okay, and this one is student, actually Beijing student, okay, and so I can move these things around, and they're a lot larger than I want them to be because I'm going to create thumbnails going across here. This is going to be my portfolio page. So let's start by, or let's continue by adding a headline across the top. We're going to make a filler headline for now because we're not really sure what our logo is going to be in our navigational system, like our menu system. So let's create some text. All right, and so I'm going to create a text layer in here. And for right now, I don't want it to be bright green. Let's go with this darker gray. Not sure what font style I want. I'm just going to go ahead and type in whatever is here for now. Let's see, photography portfolio. Sounds good. And let's make this a little larger. Let's go like 48. That should be good for now. So I'm just created a text layer. You can manipulate, if you go into edit mode, you can actually go and use the options bar and start changing the text, the size, the style, or when you're in edit mode of that text layer that I just created, you can also go to the character panel and it shows up in the options bar at the end. So if you click on that, it'll pop up the character panel and give you a few extra choices that you may not have in the options bar up top. Okay, so alright, so there we have this element. So to move these elements around, you just have to remember what they were, where they are, and use your move tool and select on the layer and move that element around. Some people like to use this auto select feature. If you check this auto select feature, what that does is and when you click on something, it will jump to the layer. So instead of having to go and click on the layer that you want to move and then move it, it will actually jump to the layer. The only problem with that is sometimes when layers are overlapping each other, you don't know which one it's clicking on. So in this case, you know, if you're on this Beijing layer and you're not sure if like which one was overlapping which one, in this case it's kind of evident. But the rule is it'll always do the one on the top. So if you needed to get to something underneath, you need to make sure there's nothing overlapping it. Because sometimes you have overlapping layers that are like color gradient overlays, and not gradient overlays, but just color blends overlays. Because a lot of times what I like to do is like put an entire olive or blue style blend mode over the whole thing. I'll do that a lot with Photoshop montages. Not necessarily a website, but we can look at that in another lesson. So that's kind of the start. I'm going to finish this up in the third video, which will pretty much just start aligning things up and do a little add a navigation bar and create the rest of the thumbnails and a footer.